big events like this, I try to go home and sit alone to watch and listen. I think that's what I'm going to do tomorrow night. And I often joke with people that that's what I do in election nights, because I don't want anybody to see me cry if the results call for that. That's how I'm going to be tomorrow night. I'm going to watch this alone because I don't want anybody to see me cry because it will be a very emotional time for me to see Joe Biden give what will be his swan song. And quite frankly, it makes me a little bit emotional to even talk about it.
Just put politics aside for a minute. Forget about the polls and the debates and the punditry. Don't panic. They'll all be right here waiting for you when we're done with this conversation. But just for a moment, think about what Jim Clyburn said there, that for him tonight, for better or worse, he will be watching his friend, Joe Biden, deliver these remarks from the Oval Office in the spirit of appreciating what we're all going to be watching tonight. Think about it at a human level. President Biden's historic primetime address that airs at 8 p.m. Eastern. It represents something seen as altogether completely rare in Washington, an instance in which someone holding great power, the most power in American politics, acts against his or her own self-interest, sets aside his or her own political ambitions purely and solely for the good of the country. For that reason, whatever the president says, between the words "my fellow Americans" and "may God protect our troops," will likely provide the American people with some degree of catharsis, and it'll allow him to go out completely, as his friend Jim Clyburn said there, his swan song will be on his terms. He's also expected to show the country the immediate path forward. We understand that from the Resolute desk in the Oval Office, President Joe Biden, now unburdened by the obligations and rigors of a re-election campaign, will go into detail on how he plans to spend his final months in office as president. And in that way, tonight ought to be energizing as well, because with no campaign to run, President Joe Biden will be free to do what he does best, lead and president. Joining us at the table, former top State Department official during the Obama administration, Rick Stengel, joins the conversation. Eddie and John are still here. I said this to you earlier today. Something in Jim Clyburn's unembarrassed love and affection for Joe Biden just cracked something open in me and made me wonder again if we can be that again. Can we love our leaders again? Can we put a spotlight on that which is good? I know we just spent 42 minutes talking about all that is bad, but it's an open question I have as we go into this really historic address from the Oval Office.
Yeah, Madison was right. It requires certain kinds of people with virtue in order for democracy to work. And that means we can't drown in contempt. We can't suffocate a kind of empathy, an other regard, because we disagree. And so in this moment when so much is at stake and we're all kind of on edge, what we do is we reach for a kind of mean-spiritedness. And what happens in that moment, Nicole, is a corrosion of the soul. The very thing that we loathe takes root in us, and then we become mean-spirited. And one of the beautiful things in the tradition out of which I come is that you gotta forgive, you gotta love, and it's not just so much an other regarding, it's also a kind of self-care. And so what I expect to hear tonight, right, is a gentle man trying to come to terms with a choice. And what I saw yesterday with Jim Clyburn is an 84-year-old man understanding what's before him too, and seeing it in his friend. So it's all too human.
It's really, to the degree that we can still be moved by our leaders, I think that's what we'll see tonight. What are you looking for?
Yeah, no, it was very moving to hear Jim Clyburn and Eddie, of course. There's a little bit of that Shakespearean thing about the Macbeth, the Thane of Quarter. Nothing became his life like the leaving of it. Our feelings for Joe Biden are increased because of his sign-off like this, because that has actually been the thing that proves that he was genuine, that he was honest, that these are values that he really lives. But it's a super important speech, but he has to do three important things. He has to explain why he's doing it. He has to say, I'm still up for the job for the next 6 months. And he has to put a lot of wind at the back of Kamala Harris, because to finish the job, he's handing off the baton. And he has to make sure that she is launching with a super amount of speed to basically do that. And that's what voters have to see as well. So it's a big job he has to do. He's going to touch a lot of heartstrings. But he also has a very practical thing, which he has to kind of push her forward.
John.
I love Jim Clyburn, and I loved everything about that, except here's the one thing that I disagree with it. Swan song, you know, he's going to be president of the United States until January of 2025. And I think it's not just that he will have other swan songs. He will give other big speeches. He will be behind the Resolute desk again before he actually steps off the stage. But as a political matter, he is going to be Kamala Harris's partner for the next 6 months. There could be national security crises. There could be crises at the border. There could be cyber attacks. There could be all manner of things that Joe Biden, as president, will have to deal with that will have a direct impact on her, because she is, for good and bad, things that have been unpopular about the Biden administration, things that have been popular. The Trump campaign will do a very good job of basically saying, of trying to make her own all the things that America hasn't liked about the Biden years. He was not a very popular president. He was going out in his high 30s when he decided to get off the ticket. They are going to try to make her own all that and try to weigh her down with the things that are unpopular. She's going to argue that some of those things are misunderstood, and she's going to say that there are a bunch of things they've gotten done and accomplishments, all of that. But the notion that the two of them are still going to be together, even though she is now at the top of the ticket, he's still running the government that she and he together ran for 3.5 years. So when crises occur, and as in my favorite political statement of all time, Bob Rubin, former Treasury Secretary, used to say, events will occur. You know, events will occur. And some of those events will be big events. Yeah. And they'll land on Joe Biden's feet. And so to Rick's point about he needs to not only convince as a rhetorical matter the country that he's ready to keep going for the next 6 months, but he is not going to be making, this is a sort of swan song. Yeah. But there are going to be moments, I bet every dollar in my pocket that he's going to be in the center of this campaign again in an active way, not just as a rhetorical trope by Republicans or by Vice President Harris. He's going to be in the middle of things, dealing with stuff that's going to really matter on the campaign trail.
But, John, events do matter. But the biggest event is the campaign. I mean, look, today, you know, Bibi Netanyahu was speaking to Congress. Have we talked about it? I don't know. Like, yes. Everything becomes subordinate to the campaign. And so
the national security crisis, though, Rick, as you know, is a different
I do, but it won't be quite DEFCON 4 of what it should be. You know, the Mario Cuomo line, we govern in prose and we campaign in poetry. You know, she's going to have all the poetry. He's going to have all the prose. You know, we're interested in the poetry. That's what we're going to be talking about. So, I agree that events will happen, but they'll be lesser order of magnitude based on the fact that everyone's going to be focused on the campaign.
Well, I certainly hope so, because the kind of events I'm worried about are events that could overshadow a lot of things. But
well, and to bolster John's point, I mean, when there was an assassination attempt against ex-President Donald Trump, the country only had one president. Right. And he gave 3 speeches in 2 days, and he's the only president we had. I mean, and I think he accepts, or his cabinet accepts the resignation of, I hear what you're both saying.
They're both true.
But you know, the last 4 weeks we've had, I'm just going to knock on a little bit of wood that it won't continue to be the kind of fall where crises sort of rock us from week to week. But I think they're both going to be on center stage in a really extraordinary way. And that might be some of what we're seeing tonight.